Content marketing is a creative endeavour, right? We're all agreed that if you create content, there's an element of creativity involved, and more so if you're repurposing your content and have to create new and exciting ways to repackage and communicate your message. Now, anyone who's embarked on a creative project will know how much time and energy it takes. It can be really hard to get it right. So why do people expect creativity to come cheap, to come at a really low cost? Listen to this episode to find out why you shouldn't undervalue creative work.
Welcome to the Content 10X Podcast, the show where content creators learn how to harness the power of content repurposing. And now, your host, Amy Woods.
Hello and welcome to the Content 10X Podcast. I'm your host, Amy Woods, the founder of Content 10X, and in today's episode, I'm talking about creativity and why content repurposing is a creative endeavour worth the investment.
Something that I've observed since running my creative agency for the past 3 years or so is how much people undervalue creative work. Now, I suppose it's not surprising since it can often be easy to undervalue things when you don't necessarily understand what goes into them, but I find it to be really prominent with those who require creative work. So what is it about creativity more so than any other type of work that I've seen before that people undervalue it so much? Now, I've learned that to really win in the world of content, you have to accept there is a value to be placed on content and creativity. Content can be transformative for a business and there is value to be recognised in that. And if people constantly think that they can do it cheaper, they can do it themselves, it's all so simple and easy, they can outsource to a general offshore VA for barely anything, then they're not likely to see results. As a creative agency owner myself, I've learned it's not worth working with people with that mindset. They're not ready to be supported by, for example, an agency like Content 10X, an agency like mine. Because when getting support with content, you need to have the right mindset from the start. Now, let me just expand on this. What's interesting is that I'm sure if I asked you the question, do you value content and do you believe in content marketing? Most people would say that they do. We're always hearing the phrase content is king. And whilst it might be overused, it's true, content is king. And I think most of us recognise that the great thing about content marketing is that it's audience centric. We create content to attract people and not distract them. It's not about interrupting people or disrupting what they were doing, as you might with other types of ads like banner ads and commercials and things like that. But it's about attracting people by informing, educating, entertaining, inspiring, then growing and nurturing our audience through creating more content and turning our audience into customers. Because when you build an audience through content, they start to like you, to trust you, and they come to you versus you thrusting advertisements in their face. And of course, you can do both. But in other words, done well, content is very, very powerful, not just for marketing, but for many reasons. More and more businesses are realizing this and investing in content, but particularly the creative aspects of content. Because the reality is creating content is not easy. You may not have the time or the resources to create lots of high quality content and be consistent. Now, very often, certainly with the people who are interested in our services, they can take ownership of the strategy. They know their audience, they know their message, and they know how they want to reach them. But the creation, the doing, the podcast producing, video editing, graphic design work, endless copywriting, they don't want to own that. Hence outsourcing. But why is it that so many people then undervalue the creative work that they require support with? Now, let's take an example. A person requires an infographic to be created. It's pretty complex. Perhaps they've provided the copy, but they need it designed and brought to life. What could this take? So 4 hours, maybe more like 8 hours. So a full day for a graphic designer. And then add in some review and revision cycles, possibly about 10 hours of work. The person requesting the work is thinking that this infographic, it's going to be about $30, $50, and the graphic designer quotes $400, 10 hours of work at $40 an hour. The requester's like, what, are you serious? And that's probably a low estimate, by the way, as well. And I see this happening all the time, not just with graphic design work, but with video editing and certainly with copywriting. Now, what I see happening a lot, I guess, is firstly people just assuming how long it will take. So perhaps they do appreciate the concept of an hourly rate, but they genuinely think that creative work takes very little time. So it'll be like, here's a 1 hour podcast interview. I'd like it written up into an SEO focused 2,000 word high quality blog post. And in their head, they're thinking that'll take a couple of hours. So they underestimate the time and they likely underestimate the hourly rate as well. But whilst they just assume it's a couple of hours, they're not factoring in it takes an hour just to listen to the episode, not to mention listening slowly, making notes, then the writing, looking things up to expand on points and doing the SEO research. Again, this could easily take a day for a copywriter, but they're assuming a couple of hours.
Hey, just a little break from this week's episode to let you know about becoming a Content 10x Insider. If you want more content repurposing tips and advice, then why not join hundreds of business owners, marketers and content creators who get them delivered straight to their inbox once a week by subscribing to the Content 10x newsletter. As well as tips and advice, you get industry updates, inspiring stories, exclusive content, offers and more. You can subscribe at content10x.com/newsletter and there's a link in the show notes too. Okay, back to this week's episode.
It's rare to see this kind of undervaluing in other professions. If you hire an architect to draw up a plan to build a summer house, I don't think we assume how long the architect needs. We respect their profession and are guided by them. Now, assuming you're not in the industry. And likewise with many other things like a mechanic fixing our car or a hairdresser, if we're not the expert, then we are led by them. But what I've learned in the past 3 years or so is that people lose perspective when it comes to creative work. Now, it's really easy to compare professions like lawyers, physiotherapists and doctors and say that we generally appreciate those services come at a price. So why not creativity? But let's take another example that's maybe more easy to digest than comparing to lawyers and doctors. So say someone wants to get in shape, so they hire a personal trainer. The personal trainer charges $60 an hour and they've said to get them in shape, they need 4 sessions a week for 12 weeks. So that's $240 a week and $2,880 for the 12-week program. Okay, seems about right for a body transformation, just under $3,000. But the same person wants to embark on a content project. They want support with video editing, their podcast and some copywriting to up their LinkedIn game to the next level. So they basically want expert support for a LinkedIn transformation. And they're told that's going to cost $240 a week too. What, are you having a laugh? Now, people would pay for their PT but expect creative work for a fraction of that, work that will grow their business, so an investment. And it's so strange, but this is how it is. Creative work is chronically undervalued. And as a creative agency owner, I guess it's just really shocked me how this happens all the time. So never have I ever heard the words just in front of such complex, highly skilled work before. So it's, would you just be able to develop an entire brand for me too, as we don't have one yet? Or whilst you're at it, would you be able to just write an ebook for us or just write an email nurture sequence for every blog post? But it's never just. I think undervaluing creative work causes problems. It's often one of two things. So people underinvest, they decide on a budget based on what they think it's worth. For example, I'm willing to spend $30 a week on my graphic design needs, and they get what they pay for. The quality of the work is poor, and they repeat this cycle working with person after person or service provider after service provider who they are paying very little for and getting little back and then getting frustrated. Or they never get help. They get frustrated that it's all too expensive and do it themselves. So they put pressure on themselves or their team to pick up work that they are not skilled in and don't have time for. And it actually ends up having a negative impact on their business. So content then doesn't help their business. So my advice is to be realistic about hiring people to support you with creative work. Do not lose perspective. Do not expect to pay a designer less than you pay a local teenager to clean your car. And if you do, you may find yourself constantly disappointed and constantly under-supported and not achieving your goals. Instead, come back to recognizing that content is king. Remember the power of content. Think about what you are creating content for and how it helps your personal brand and your business. And very, very importantly, see it as an investment and not a cost. If you invest wisely in content and you have the right strategy in place, there is a return on investment. If you're a creative, I'd love to know if you have ever experienced the undervaluing of your work. And if you hire creative support, does any of this sound familiar? So please leave a comment and let me know.